Okay, it's 9:59 on the 17th of July 2025. It is a Thursday night. And tonight, the sky is not much better than it was last night, which means this is not going to turn out to be the Nebula tour that I had hoped, but I am going to do the Nebula tour. We're now running a 10-second exposure in ASI Live. I've set the temperature of the cooler in the ZWO imager to 10 degrees centigrade, minus 10 degrees centigrade. It has not achieved that temperature yet. I've set focus. I've done synchronizations to both Turris and later Messier 13. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this for a full 25 minutes and take the risk that it's going to get curtailed by the software in the snipping tool. However, I did put the laptop in airplane mode, which means it'll make no attempts whatsoever to try to reach the local wireless access point, which is now my current hypothesis as to why imaging is sometimes lost by shortening the actual time in which data is collected. What I'm doing now, of course, is adjusting the histogram to get a better view, more aesthetic view. We will be operating at 10 seconds tonight, primarily because the sky is not in particularly good condition and the nebula filter is in the optical tray. So this may just basically be a warm-up for another night when the sky is deeper. In the next 5 or 10 minutes, we should enter into sky dark, but I rather doubt that we're going to get good transparency because I can already see luminosity in the night sky being reflected back down. So here's our view of Messier 13. We'll have a look at 6207 before I launch into nebula studies for the night, for the evening. Plus maybe a few adventitious galaxies along the way, just to get a better sense of how the nebula filter affects luminosities that have a much broader band than nebulae. Well, to be clear, we're now getting the vaguest of views of NGC 6207 at 11.5 plus magnitude galaxy, which within about 40 arc minutes of north and east of Messier 13. So we're not getting much in the way of depth, even at 10-second stacked exposures. In fact, we're not even finding matched triangles to overlay the image. But I suspect the galaxy is right about there. One thing that's very interesting is I have a very, very narrow band on the histogram, which you might expect when you have a bandpass filter in place that's designed for nebulosity. Once again, I do want to reiterate the fact the stars look pretty sharp when you're using the nebula filter, and that's because the luminosity is restricted so much, so it's not spilling outside too far outside what otherwise would be their disks. Right. For the nebula filter, we do want to include both planetary nebula, emissive nebula, potentially reflective nebula. It'll be very interesting on that front. Globular clusters can give a fine view because their stellar components can be narrowed down so you get a little better resolution. But what we're looking at here right now is NGC 6058. I've imaged it before. Planetary nebula in Hercules. Magnitude 13, 25 by 20 arc seconds in size, with a central star of magnitude 13.9. Very distant, probably about 8 to 9 times that of the Ring Nebula, M57. It is located 11,500 light years away. Light ascension 16 hours, 4 minutes, 26 seconds, with a declination of plus 40 degrees, 40 minutes, 58 seconds. We are getting some background luminosity. I can play with the histogram a little bit, but we start to lose it right away. If I push the histogram all the way to the left bar, this is what we end up with. So here is probably a pretty good compromise view. Here we're having a rather adventitious planetary nebula in Scorpius. NGC 6072 is magnitude 14, 50 by 30 arc minutes. It is larger than the previous 6058. It's got a central star of magnitude 17.5. We're obviously not seeing much of this, are we? 3,300 light years distant, and there's a reason. We're at right ascension 16 hours, 12 minutes, 58 seconds, which pretty much is culminating at this hour, about 10:13. But our declination is minus 36 degrees, 13 minutes, 47 seconds. I typically don't go this far, but I did want to make a record of a planetary nebula being in Scorpius for those who may want to track it down from more southerly climes. Okay, here we have another one, a planetary nebula. This one's even deeper south in Scorpius. I'll push the magnification up a little bit just in case it's present. We are not seeing it on the screen, but I did want to get the data in. NGC 6153, planetary nebula Scorpius, magnitude 11.5, 25 arc seconds in size with a 15.6 magnitude star, 4,800 light years distant, light ascension 16 hours, 31 minutes, 30 seconds, and a declination of minus 40 degrees, 15 minutes, and 13 seconds. Puts this maybe about 5 degrees above the horizon. So we're pretty much looking at the hills to the south. Okay, we've had a look at this one the previous evening. This is NGC 6210. I'm going to just keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing the magnification just so we can see what will come about in terms of revealing any kind of texture in this very bright. We're up to 300%, which means basically we've 6 times 150. So this is about 700x. There's a couple of stars flanking it. We're not getting any resolution. NGC 6210 is the planetary in Hercules, magnitude 9.7, 20 by 13 arc seconds, with a magnitude 12.5 central star, 7,400 light years distant. Right ascension 16 hours, 44 minutes, 29 seconds, with a declination of plus 23 degrees, 47 minutes, 59 seconds. I do not think I have to take this any further. Okay, just to be complete, another planetary nebula deep south in Scorpius, NGC 6302, planetary 12.8 magnitude, largish, 72 by 30 arc seconds, magnitude 16.6 central star, 2,400 light years distant, has a right ascension of 17 hours, 13 minutes, and 44 seconds, and it is 7 degrees further south than I usually go at minus 370611. I kind of wish we could pick something up here. We did get a little ghost of a planetary previously this far south. Do a little zoom in, see if anything turns up. I would say nada. Well, this surprises me. We got nothing here. It's NGC 6309, planetary nebula Ophiuchus. It's brightish, magnitude 11.6, small, 20 by 10 arc seconds. Magnitude 16.3 central star, 8,900 light years distant, with a right ascension of 17 hours, 14 minutes, and 4 seconds, and a declination of minus 12 degrees, 54 minutes, and 37 seconds. I am vaguely seeing it right here in the middle of the field. Very vague indeed. I've already done my best with the histogram. No success in this. So at least we've got a mention of it for future reference. Well, what we're supposed to be seeing here is a nebula in Scorpius, NGC 6334, large, very large, 120 minutes by 110. Well, actually, it's kind of large for a planetary, but it's not too bad for just an emissive nebula. 5,700 light years distant with a right ascension of 17 hours, 20 minutes, 49 seconds, and an explanation for our lack of nebulosity, just some weird stars here, which are probably associated with it, is that it's at minus 36 degrees, 6 minutes, and 12 seconds. Maybe a future revelation. Here we have another missing in action planetary nebula in Scorpius, NGC 6337, magnitude 12.3, 38 by 28 arc seconds in extension, with a magnitude 14.8 central star, 4,400 light years distant, right ascension 17 hours, 22 minutes, 15 seconds, and a declination of a whopping minus 38 degrees, 29 minutes. There's the data on that. Okay, take your pick on NGC 6357, a nebula in Scorpius. Emissive type, that makes it a little easier, 50 by 40 arc seconds, 3,900 light years distant. Like most nebula, I'm pushing the magnification up. This is about 300x. It's at right ascension 17 hours, 24 minutes, 43 seconds with a declination of minus 34 degrees, 12 minutes, and 6 seconds. Given that it's emissive, it's probably this little one right here. I'll do some additional zoomage. We'll go to 200%. I'll position in the middle of the field. And that, I suspect, is the most southerly nebula we've picked up this evening at minus 34 degrees, 12 minutes, 6 seconds in Scorpius. Once again, an emissive nebula, NGC 6357. Here we have a nice annular planetary nebula. It's Oops, that's not it. Put in the wrong value. Give me a moment, please. I'll allow it to develop a little bit on the screen. Had several passes now of 10 seconds. The cooler is up the temperature. Everything should be working as well as it might. I'm searching through the database. Find a reference to this planetary. Nope, this is 6357. We've had a look at that one. All right, stepping through. How did I forget that number? Okay, NGC 6369 is a planetary nebula in Ophiuchus, magnitude 11, 30 by 29 arc seconds, with a magnitude 15.1 central star. I'm not getting any hint of it. It should be visible if we weren't using a nebula filter. 3,600 light years distant at right ascension, 17 hours, 29 minutes, 20 seconds, and a declination of a mere minus 23 degrees, 45 minutes, and 34 seconds. Okay, what's developing on the screen right now is NGC 6439, planetary nebula in Sagittarius, magnitude 13, tiny. Wow, what is that? It's only supposed to be 6 by 5 arc seconds with a magnitude 18 central star. 20,600 light years distant puts this pretty close to the center of the galaxy, maybe about 4,000 light years in our direction. Right ascension 17 hours, 48 minutes, 19 seconds, and a declination of minus 16 degrees, 28 minutes, 44 seconds. We're seeing several instances of nebulosity here. If this is our planetary, it is obviously much bigger than 5 arc seconds. Okay, so I'm not quite sure what we were seeing there. I suspect this must be the planetary. Let's do a huge zoom in to begin with, just to get a sense of whether that is possible. We're going to go to 200%, 4 times 150 is 600x. Could very well be this one here, but it's quite surprising, actually. Let's leave that up. to the Sky Live or something, or maybe Steve Gottlieb to give us a better description of it. That was NGC 6439. Now this is clearly a planetary nebula. It's NGC 6445 in Sagittarius. Magnitude 13, it looks pretty bright for magnitude 13. 35 by 30 arc seconds, has a magnitude 19 central star, 4,500 light years distant. Light ascension is 17 hours, 49 minutes, 15 seconds with a declination of minus 20 degrees, 36 seconds. That's a pretty big delta between the central star and the total luminosity of about 6 magnitudes, and that roughly 6 magnitudes is somewhere between 100 to 250 times fainter. But we are getting a pretty decent look there, and let's be thankful for that because we have missed so many this evening. What we should be seeing here is a nebula and open cluster in Scorpius. NGC 6480, magnitude 12, 5 arc minutes in size and emissive. We're operating at 250x, but 5 arc minutes should be about this region of the screen. We can look around, see if we can pick out an open cluster. Maybe that's what they're referring to, but it's way off in the center. I don't think we're seeing it. There's some hints of nebulosity here, but no open cluster. Anyway, file that one away. All right, this is a 30-second exposure using the nebula filter of obviously the Ring Nebula. Now, obviously, we want to really, 30-second exposure is providing a tremendous amount of light. The ZWO system is capable of quite a bit of definition in terms of resolution, down to 0.5 arc seconds, although the scope's only good to 0.8 on a very good night. While waiting for the scope to reposition onto the Ring Nebula, I did take a look at the sky, and the Milky Way is vaguely visible through Cygnus, which means stars to 4.0 can be held direct. When you can see the rift, typically means stars to magnitude 4.8 to 5, and those are the minimal conditions that you can get pretty decent imagery with. And that is typically occurs, but the skies have been really a little bit dusty and wet the last couple of evenings. So here's our view of the Ring Nebula for the evening. And these are more or less meant to be artistic because we've seen them before. I'll go ahead and push the magnification. Now we're up to 200%, which is 4 times 150 or about 600x. Quite astonishing, actually. We're not getting a very sharp view, however, but it was interesting to zoom in on it. So probably the best view we get in terms of nebulosity is back at where it looks sharp, maybe 60% there. So there is our view of the Ring Nebula, Messier 57, through 4.0 skies and using a nebula filter. So let's have a look at the dumbbell next. Well, folks, not bad at all. The sky is a little more transparent this evening. We are, of course, operating at 30-second exposure times. We are getting quite a decent view of Messier 27, the dumbbell nebula. In fact, this is a better view than I ever got through the Rev 2 system because we are seeing extensive nebulosity even outside the football-shaped perimeter that the dumbbell shows. It's obviously called the dumbbell because this axis is what was originally seen through small scopes. Larger scopes can expand it to it looks more egg-shaped, and then this extension here I have yet to have seen. Very intriguing thing about the histogram, however. The histogram has basically extended itself throughout the entire range of frequencies at this point, which means as far left as it can get and as far right. Meanwhile, the luminosity curve is quite peaky, in the bandpass region that's associated with the nebula filter I'm using in the optical train of the scope. I am quite impressed with this view tonight, and we will have a look at Crescent Nebula NGC 6888 to see if we can equally be shocked by the quality of the view despite only a semi-transparent sky of the evening. I might say that this is a very decent view of the Crescent Nebula this evening. Has the sky actually gotten more transparent? The view is quite excellent. We're getting lots and lots of texture. Stars look pretty good. There's a little reflective nebulosity over here, which I think may be more or less line of sight and is not associated with the crescent because it is an emissive type nebulosity. The view here is quite good. I have to say, of course, we're exposing it for 30 seconds at a time. It looks like we're getting good triangulation on stars, so the stack is quite good because you can see current image down there on the bottom instead of not being able to find a triangle. I think we might want to push this to 60 seconds, but I have another idea. Let's go down into Sagittarius and see if we can't turn up some of the nebulosity that is not emissive. For instance, the Swan Nebula, I think that's reflective largely. So I'm going to go through the Messier catalog and pick out a few of those so we can get a sense of how it might look. I did image these studies last night, the dumbbell, the ring, and the crescent, and I will include some snapshots, if not the entire video sequence, because I did continue it after what I posted this morning on the Golden Phoenix Published YouTube channel and the astronomy playlist, but I did not make it generally available. Did publish some stuff about last night, but did not make it generally available to the public. And I did include some better images later on that I've taken, but I have not released them yet. So I can use them as part of this latter series. By the way, the 18-minute cycle I did with the snipping tool, and while the laptop was in airplane mode, it didn't lose. There was no curtailment or loss of any of that video. So let's go ahead and have a look at a few of those deep Sagittarian nebulosities to see how they might turn out. Also, I am extraordinarily interested in the fact that the histogram set itself up throughout the entire spectrum of luminosity, as far left as it could get, as far right. There is light across that entire spectrum, which is probably why it auto-selected the widest possible histogrammic range. Well, folks, here we are having a reasonably good view of the Eagle Nebula with the pillars of creation easily seen on the screen. Now, I have made them out using the Rev2 system. I believe it was at 5-second exposure times on very good nights of seeing in the summer. But this is marginal at best, and we are seeing very clear indications totally encompassing the pillars and the rest of the Eagle nebulosity. And I'm going to push it up to 50% magnification, which we were unable to do that. This is 150x, and typically with the Rev2 system, if you pushed it beyond the 75x, you lost light instead of gained it, because at 75x you had already exhausted the resolution of the pixels. With this system, I can push up as far with the ZWO system as 100% in terms of the e-zoomage, and we don't really lose any luminosity because each of those pixels reveals itself in turn, maintaining its luminosity edge. So Very nice. However, the stars are doubling up a little bit at 30-second exposure time. But here is a very fine view using a nebula filter through the 6-inch scope and the ZWO imager for 30-second stacked exposures and widest possible settings on the histogram luminosity curve, which includes everything between those two setting points. Here, it may not be quite recognizable because of the extensive luminosity available to us is the Swan Nebula. I'm going to initiate, because we're getting some doubling of stars at 30 seconds, initiate it once again. But here's our initial view of Messier 17, the Swan. Looking pretty good on this first pass after resetting. We'll do some zoomage here and center it up. And here is our Swan Nebula, also called the Omega Nebula. I'll let that sit for a second as for your enjoyment as I look for our next Messier nebulosity. Messier 20. Messier 20, of course, is the Trifid Nebula, which centered up quite well, actually, on the screen. We are getting stellar doubling, so we probably need a couple more passes, but at 30 seconds, I don't think it's really particularly necessary with nebulosity, at least for a first swag. But let's go ahead and complete this second pass and see if we can get rid of the doubling. Cannot find matched triangles. No. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and have a look at one more. Right now, we're just getting a general sense of what the nebula will look like, and then I'll maybe run it down to 5-second exposure time, duplicating the Rev2 exposures after this. Oh, wow. Here we're seeing a 5-second exposure of the Trifid. And frankly, it looks pretty good. So I think this view may be better than the Rev2 system because we have the higher resolution. But let's go back and have another look at the pillars and see how well they come out before we have one final look at 5 seconds at the dumbbell planetary. Okay, here we have a 5-second exposure. We've lost an awful lot of the Eagle Nebula, but you can see why it's called the Eagle. You got your head here, you got one spread wing here, there, and the tail back there. We are seeing the pillars. The presence is kind of poor, but I do believe we got this kind of view with the Rev2 system. Meanwhile, we're able to push the magnification up. We can try and see if it brightens at all if we go to 100%. And yeah, it gets a little more present. So not a bad exploration for the evening. We'll stay at 5 seconds and go back to the dumbbell and maybe repeat the crescent because it doesn't take long to stack images at 5-second exposure times. All right, here's our view of Messier 27, the dumbbell. We are seeing the expulsion of the ionized gases off to the extension, as well as the central star of magnitude 14.1. With the nebula filter, they don't seem to get much fainter than that. Probably 15th magnitude, whereas ordinarily we could pick up 17th magnitude stars at 5-second exposures. I do want to point out that I'm going to now extend the histogram all the way across like previously, and we got nothing. So the only way I was being able to present the dumbbell for some reason, let's draw it all the way back to where we still have some luminosity. But to actually bring it in as well as I did, I had to really squeeze on the histogram settings to get the view we initially had. Oh, disappeared completely. Wow. Very intriguing. Very sensitive to the histogram settings on the dumbbell, whereas the other nebula, Serpens and Sagittarius, popped right in, and I cannot explain that in any way. Let's go have a look at the crescent and move on from there. Not especially present on the screen right now is the Crescent Nebula, NGC 6888 in Cygnus. I'd say the view is, I'd have to go and really go through the archives, but I would say it's comparable to the Rev2 system at 5-second exposure times and maximum sensitivity. The only issue with the Rev2 system, that in comparison, was that it was only 15 by 20 arc minutes in size, whereas right now we are seeing some 35 by 25 arc minutes of apparent size on the screen. And when we back it off to here, we are getting over probably a degree in 10 or 15 arc minutes laterally and vertically. So it really is great to have the ZWO system, especially now when I do not have to use a secondary camera to be able to image what's on the screen. So what I'm going to do is, for Carpe Noctem view, is I'm going to push 60-second view of the Crescent Nebula NGC 6888, and that will be our Carpe Noctem for the evening. Of course, when you press to 60 seconds and you've got your scope mounted on a tripod on a wooden deck, any motion is going to cause some disturbance of the imagery. So what we're seeing here is a 60-second exposure. I am going to completely encompass the light curve using, ooh, that did not help at all. Wow, why was it that the other nebulae, probably because they were reflective in some way. Anyway, I do have to narrowly prescribe the histogram settings to get the view you are seeing right now. Is that right in the screen too much? That was the left histogram. There is a very fine view. We'll let it go ahead and run another 60-second stack. And as we basically summarize the evening, the sky is a little more transparent than it was last night. We got some decent views of reflective and emissive extended nebulosities. We lost some planetary nebulae when they were too far down to the south. Probably all the good stuff that we were able to image was at least 20 degrees above the southern horizon. The sky's middle third looks pretty dark, but it only goes down to about the celestial equator and overhead. So the seeing conditions are marginal, but by pushing the exposure time and playing with histogram settings, I do think that we've got some pretty good recorded images for the evening. Not that they could get better, but let's forget galaxies with a nebula filter. They simply are not going to turn up on the screen. And with that, I am going to say carpe